is currently facing a massive slowdown, which has led to new challenges for the industry all over the world, including India. I have seen people addressing this as a major industrial meltdown, but though the Chamber is concerned about the short and medium impact of the situation, but we consider this to be a cyclic correction and expect the slowdown to reverse with balanced approach and fiscal discipline. The world has seen similar slowdown and subsequent recovery a number of times in the past few decades. The issue of concern, however, is the current trade wars and trade barriers being put in by major economies across the world, which unfortunately may make the recovery slower. I am also happy to state that the Chamber has always worked very closely with the state government and have aligned their activity to be in sync with the aims and objectives of the government. Both the government and the Chamber are working towards the same goal of reaching a higher level of industrial growth, which is the key contributor to positive changes in the social structure as well. At this point, I have to say, Dr. Mitra, as we have already heard, is coming a little late, but I must mention this, that at this point, I must thank Dr. Amit Mitra, Honorable Minister of Finance and Industry, and the state machinery for their full support towards all the endeavors of the Chamber. One of the focal area of the Chamber this year, of course, you have already seen that, but one of the focal area was to present West Bengal as a preferred investment destination in certain advanced countries. Towards this end, the Chamber, on the invitation of Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, I can see Mrs. Pandey here, the regional head of Indo-German Chamber, and the President, Mrs. Nari Kalwani, is also here. On the invitation of this chamber, we had the privilege to participate at their annual conference at Düsseldorf with a strong delegation and could present West Bengal's potential as a strong industrial destination. At this conference, Srimati Vandana Jadhav, Managing Director of West Bengal Industrial Development Corporation, also presented West Bengal as an industrial destination with tremendous potential and highlighted the strong infrastructure and other facilities available in West Bengal. I once again sincerely thank Dr. Mitra. I will personally call him and say him once more, I've done it earlier, for supporting this endeavor of the Chamber. It would also be of interest for you to know that this meeting was held at Düsseldorf, the capital city of North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, a region with whom Government of West Bengal has entered into a memorandum of understanding for mutual cooperation. I also need to acknowledge the support that we have received from Indo-German Chamber of Commerce and its director, Mr. Bernhard Steinrucke, for giving us the opportunity of showcasing West Bengal at such a major conglomeration of industrialists of Germany. Many of you are aware, or you have already seen, the wonderful work which has been done at the Webel BCCI Tech Incubation Center, a responsibility which was assigned to the Chamber by the Government of West Bengal. The objective of the Incubation Center, of course, is to encourage and facilitate the startups of deserving entrepreneurs. I am pleased to mention that this center has already become operational and the incubators are currently functioning and are being helped and supported by a mentor team organized by the Chamber. The Chamber has also helped them to connect with the potential investors and collaborators such as TCS, Bandhan Bank, Amazon, Google, to name a few. And the Chamber, this Incubation Center, has also received encouraging response from many countries like Japan, Germany, and also some other countries for looking at the possibility of cooperation. It would not be out of place to mention here that the Chamber was also given the responsibility of Japan session of the last BGBS held in January 2019. Another focus area of the Chamber this year was education and skill development, and I am pleased to inform that the Chamber has entered into new partnership with the University of Glasgow and University of Strathclyde, and are working with this overseas university for their research projects in India. The Chamber is also working very closely with the Government of West Bengal in various skill-related activities, including catalyzing the large-scale recruitment of qualified trainees under government's PBSSG scheme. You have already seen the video of the large number of programs undertaken by the Chamber throughout the year, and I will not go into them except mention they were in multiple sectors such as rural and agribusiness, education, entrepreneurship, energy, environment and sustainability, marketing and branding, technology including health tech, defense and cyber terrorism, international trade, metals, minerals and mining, manufacturing, skill development, employability, people management, shipping, taxation, tourism, management and lifestyle, international relations, and socio-cultural areas, to name a few. I can go on. Amongst the many programs that the Chamber has conducted, one of the unique programs of the Chamber continues to be Ratnagarbha. So you have already seen a clip of that. This program is dedicated to honor the mother of individuals who have made major contribution to the society. Chamber's program were not limited to West Bengal only and were held in many parts of the country as a part of Chamber's outreach program. I am pleased to state that various programs of the Chamber were graced by the presence of luminaries and business leaders such as Mr. M.K. Narayanan, former National Security Advisor and former Governor of West Bengal, Sri K.N. Tripathi in his capacity as Governor of West Bengal, Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, Chairman Managing Director, Hindustan Unilever Limited, Mr. Bharat Puri, Managing Director, Pidilite Industries, Mr. A.K. Jha, Chairman, Coal India, and, of course, legendary Ruskin Bond, and one and only our own Saurabh Ganguly. The Chamber feels privileged by the visit of the ambassadors from Austria, Japan, Poland, and Monaco, whose interaction with the members and participation at Chamber's program was truly a great honor. I also thank the Consul Generals of Australia, Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, and United States for their active support and gracious presence in various programs of the Chamber. We look forward to your continued support. I would like to end by thanking all of you for your support and congratulate the Secretariat, ably led by Director General Shubhadeep Ghosh, in making this Chamber a truly vibrant Chamber of Commerce as it stands today. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
We are privileged to have in our midst as guest of honor a personality who has played the deepest roles in the most key verticals of the economy. We are delighted to have with us Mr. M. Damodaran, who has traveled to Kolkata in spite of his most busy schedule for the Bengal Chamber Annual General Meeting. Mr. Damodaran has held a number of important positions in the central and state governments and in India's financial sector, including Chairman SEBI, Chairman UTI, Chairman IDBI, and Chief Secretary, Government of Tripura. While at SEBI, he was elected Chairman of the 80-member Emerging Markets Committee of the International Organization of Securities Commissions. After successful stints at UTI and IDBI, where he successfully led the turnaround efforts, and at SEBI, where he introduced improved corporate governance practices, he has set up Excellence Enablers Private Limited, EEPL, a corporate governance and board advisory consultancy firm. His pioneering role in promoting corporate governance in India invests EEPL with an experience-based leadership role in corporate governance advisory work. In addition, he is presently a consultant, advisor, coach, and mentor, and sits on the boards of some leading companies as well as on the advisory boards of some foreign entities. He is Practice Professor of Eminence at International Management Institute, IMI, Delhi. He was the founder chairman of the Indian Institute of Management, Tiruchirappalli. May I request Mr. Damodaran to please address us, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Sen, Mr. Chatterjee, Mr. Ghosh, friends. This is not the first time that I've had the privilege of being invited by this chamber. Hopefully it will not be the last. Because I was reminded that I was here twice before and I was wondering whether everyone had a quota, and I was about to exhaust my quota. I was with a friend of mine yesterday in Delhi, which is the city where I live, and I mentioned to him that I was leaving for an event at the BCCI. And like most Indians who write cricket against the column religion, he asked me, do you have any clue who is going to bat for India at number 4? Because that is the national concern, nothing else matters. Who will bat for India at number 4? I told him I have no answer to that question, but I can tell you something else. I'm going to another BCCI which has been batting for India for 186 years. And to stay with the imagery of cricket, which has old commentators in the days when I was growing up and we had only radio commentary, as they used to say, 14 short of that coveted 200. That's the history of the chamber, and you've seen it all time and time again as a chamber and as members of the chamber. So in the few minutes that I have to share some thoughts, some concerns, some apprehensions, and some anxieties with you, I thought I will first refer to the exciting times we live in. I know that a chamber with a history as rich as this, with leadership roles across sectors, and leadership roles that have demonstrated both width and depth, in hand-holding various sectors of the economy, working alongside governments to improve the life of the common man through the instruments of commerce and industry. In doing all of that, this chamber has witnessed almost everything there has been to witness in the history of humankind. And yet, perhaps, where this country is today, where we are today, is an exciting time that even this chamber might struggle to recall whether there was a precedent to something of this kind. Yes, there have been challenges, there have been crises, there have been opportunities, there have been meltdowns, there have been all manner of things in a long history. And you've seen it all. But today we live in exciting times. We don't live in interesting times because interesting is a word which in another large country has a different meaning. And some of you know that when the Chinese tell you that you live in you live in interesting times, they're not exactly making a positive statement. So we're not living in interesting times, we are living in exciting times. We are living in times in which there are no easy explanations both for what is being done and for the way those decisions will play out. Take the latest, one which you have all seen very closely, and I am sure which affects all of you in your individual as well as in your leadership roles in the entities that you lead, which is the drastic reduction of corporate taxes. Some of you might have seen that 2 rating agencies, worldwide rating agencies, who've been in the business of rating for years, have reacted differently to this. S&P Global has said this is credit negative for India. Moody's has said this is credit positive for India. And if you're a layman, you look at both of those, you wonder, what does this mean for India if there are 2 sets of experts who see this differently? And then you have the statements, and let me make this prefatory statement. It's important. I have no political affiliation. Some of what I state might have political overtones. They are entirely contextual and unintended to demonstrate any commitment to any political ideology, because that's non-existent. I have no commitment or any bias towards any political ideology. But if you look at what has happened even after this big announcement of 4 days ago when the corporate taxes were drastically reduced, when the country was told it's no longer doom and gloom, it is now boom, hopefully not bust, because bust is a word that goes with boom. But we've left gloom and doom behind us and we are on another course altogether. After that, there have been very interesting statements. And I want to say this because your chamber and all of you here are thought leaders, are influencers, are people who will help educate the common man understand what is happening in his or her country. So you have an announcement which says that there will be no reduction in expenditure. You have an announcement which says, as of now, the fiscal deficit target is not being revised. And I honestly am struggling to make sense of all of these together. Individually, they're all great statements. When you take all of them together, and I wonder, and I will reach out to Tamal Bandyopadhyay for some expert advice on this later, and I wonder what is happening. Do we have a clear course of action? Are we just making these big ticket announcements? Just rewind a little bit. You had the budget not so long ago. Before that, you had a pre-election budget which was as good as a full budget, not a vote on account. It was as big and as comprehensive as normal annual budgets are. Then you had a budget, and then you've had, I stopped counting at 4, but at least 4 sectoral interventions. Reminding one of the statement that the child who cries is the one that will get milk. So the automobile sector was heard crying the loudest. They got something. Real estate was next. They also got something. Banking, of course, will get something, because even if they don't cry, other people cry on their behalf. So they will certainly get something. And there's been mention of what exports are going to get. And in the midst of all of this, I keep wondering whether these sectoral interventions, one-off interventions, big ticket that did not seem obvious 4 months ago but seems so obvious now that it is critical, whether this is part of a pattern or it is more like T20 cricket where you swing your bat, if you manage to hit the ball, if you connect it well and hopefully in the middle of the bat, there will be good numbers to show up on the scoreboard. Otherwise, you will hear the rattling of timber behind you. So, is that the kind of policy making that we're facing? Because the reason I'm raising it here, and I wouldn't do it with too many other audiences, reason I'm raising this here is that I think at this stage we need to take a deep breath and have an informed intellectual debate in this country on whether there is a meaningful pattern to the policy framework that they're seeking to put in place. Because if that doesn't happen, you're only going to have big-ticket interventions, some of which might work at cross purposes. And then, of course, there are explanations, including the one that Uber and Ola is responsible for what happened to the automobile industry, and a former finance minister coming back with a statement, so then what happens to trucks and two-wheelers if Uber and Ola are part of the problem, or at least the basic problem. So we have explanations that, to put it simply, don't seem to wash, at least at first sight. So I think the chamber has a role. While you fix your own businesses, take advantage of the favorable tax regime that is suddenly and most unexpectedly upon you, while you fix that, I think you need to paint on the bigger canvas of seeing where this fits in as far as national policy making is concerned, as far as delivering goods and services to the common man is concerned. And that is something that I would urge you, I would beseech you to do. Most, if not all of you, must have heard the Prime Minister's speech yesterday at Houston. There was one message that I took away from that. And that was his mention that we are no longer living in an age of incrementalism. We are going to do big things. India has suffered over years, over decades, because we have been incrementalist even in putting together packages that we call reform packages. Take something, add 5% to that, you get next year's number, seems to have been the way policy making has been done over many decades. Yesterday, I think the Prime Minister put paid to that kind of policy making when he said we are no longer in an age of incrementalism, we are going to make the big moves. But big moves need to be meaningful moves. Big moves need to be well intended. Take bank mergers. The Narasimham Committee on Banking Sector Reform spoke about bank mergers many decades ago. I was privileged to assist that committee. And that committee envisaged a roadmap which had 4 large banks which would hold their own internationally, 4 to 6 banks that had pan-India presence, and other banks that were smaller and catered to different regions. Many, many years later, we now have the announcements of mergers of public sector banks. In theory, excellent, you can't complain. But the obvious advantage of merger is that what is redundant post the merger is something that you will take out of the system. So when alongside the announcement of a merger, you hear a statement that no one is going to go home as a result of this, no bank branches will be closed as a result of this, then you wonder what the merger means, what it adds up to. Some of you might recall, certainly historians of the banking industry might recall, that many years ago we had a bank called the New Bank of India. It's now part of ancient banking history. New Bank of India in the mid-90s was merged with Punjab National Bank. Until 2 years ago, in the locality where I live in Delhi, we had 2 branches of the Punjab National Bank, no more than 100 yards from each other. And when I inquired, and I bank there, I've been banking there for quite some time, when I banked there and I asked them, but why do you need to have these 2 banks? They said, one is the old New Bank of India branch, we haven't found the time to close it. It was in the mid-90s that the banks were merged. 2 years ago, they finally, in response to public pressure, closed that because there was a lot of confusion. People were going to the wrong place, which was not doing banking, it only had a board outside. Are we going to witness that? Yesterday I saw a board which said Vijaya Bank, and this might interest you, and said in smaller letters, much smaller, now Bank of Baroda. But from a distance what you see is Vijaya Bank. I think bank mergers, I'm not dealing with this lightly, need to be put together but at the right time and for the right reasons. I think the Honourable Minister is in our midst. I will pause in order to greet him, and then I will continue with what I am saying. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
We have known each other so well. Thank you. I said, I see the Minister inside. I will stop that. Thank you. So I was telling you about the timing of the bank merger. More than ever before, this is a time at which bank leaderships should have been focusing on what to do with asset quality. They should have given undivided attention to cleaning up their books and looking at asset quality. Now, what you have given bank leadership, many of them are my friends, nevertheless, I will say this. What you have given them is the perfect excuse for not attending to asset quality because they are busy with mergers. Because they have to work on mergers. Who else will work on mergers? So don't be surprised if at the end of this financial year you see asset quality which is much worse than it is now, with a perfect explanation from bank leadership saying, we had timelines to work to, we had to actually give effect to the merger decision. Was this the time? Great decision. Mr. Narasimham announced it in, 1996, if I'm not mistaken. And it should have been done long ago. But it could have been done when there were no big issues to be addressed, when you need not have been grappling with issues of asset quality and several other things. But you decided to merge them for whatever reason. Real estate, some of you might be from real estate. If until now you are friends of mine, I hope I will not lose that friendship. But what is being done for real estate seems to somehow brush under the carpet some of the excesses that the real estate industry subjected itself to, for which it was pointing the finger at the government. And now, because it is in bad shape, you are extending benefits to that and ignoring that they were part of the problem. I don't think that kind of legitimization, that kind of justification is what you should easily hand out because the economy is struggling. You need to see that people that seek help, and I'm talking about sectors, not individuals, are people that are sectors that deserve help because they are come to grief not on account of their misdeeds or misdoings. I think governments need to see that resources are scarce. I speak in the presence of a veteran finance minister. Resources are scarce, will always be scarce. And therefore, you should not hand out to less deserving candidates while there are others who are more deserving of this. And as far as your own individual units are concerned, I urge you that this is the time to take tough decisions. Just because the government of India is writing out the big checks, is foregoing almost the entire amount that the Reserve Bank of India handed to it on a platter. If you compare the numbers, it's a difference of about 25,000 crores. The rest of it is being revenue foregone, which is what you got from the Reserve Bank of India, and which you're unlikely to get every year because this is a one-off. Most of this is a one-off. You'll get some money every year, but you won't get this kind of money. Oil is not where it was in the previous few years. There's more uncertainty about where oil prices will go. The rupee is showing some signs of weakness in the recent past as compared to the levels that it had held earlier. So what should bodies like this chamber do? You've been across sectors as we've seen. But I would urge you to look at just one, not to the exclusion of the others, but perhaps move it up the priority chain, which is skill building. And I wanted to share just one thought with you, and then since one of the reasons that I've come here for is that I have the privilege of listening to the minister, and I have a ringside seat on the proceedings, as it were, without getting into the ring with him, which I can't. So I can take these liberties. I'd interacted several times without number with him when he was synonymous with Vicky, and in fact, Vicky is much the poorer after he left. So one of the things that I want to tell you, and I think this is important, and I will close with this, is skill development. Just look back. We've been patting ourselves on the back. We've been telling the whole world we have a young population, the rest of the world is old. This is our demographic dividend, but it's a dividend only if you skill it. And we've known this truth forever and a day. And yet, what have we done about skilling? If you look at the numbers, the budgetary interventions, what we've done is peanuts. With that kind, you cannot skill India. Young India doesn't have jobs of the kind that my generation had. We had jobs. If we were lucky, we got jobs. Those jobs are not available now. There are much less jobs in relation to the demand. So you've got to skill people in order that this young population, this young element, translates itself into contributing members of the economy, not recipients of hands out, which they don't want. That is inconsistent with the pride of youth. Are we doing enough for skilling? We are not. And I would urge you, as the oldest institution around, one that has demonstrated, as we were told by the Director General, the maturity of age and the enthusiasm, energy and excitement of youth. It's a very happy marriage that you have in this chamber. Not often do these attributes get married. Taking advantage of that, I would urge you to play the leadership role so that a few years from now, maybe when you are at 196, saying where to hit the next boundary, to which part of the field, you might take stock and see what you have done to skill young India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We have taken copious notes of what you have suggested, and in the realm of skills, we have started our work, and we shall continue from strength to strength. We're indebted to you for making it to Kolkata and giving us this perspective, which would enable us to shape many of our activities this coming year in sync with the vision that you have shared with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we're immensely fortunate to have the guidance, support, and vision of a personality who has been an inspiration to us all, not only in his personal capacity as an elected leader, but also as an economist, eminent thought leader, policymaker, and most of all, to many of us who have taken economics as a subject for study, a teacher. For the annual general meeting's commemorative address, may I request Dr. Amit Mitro, Honorable Minister in charge, Finance, Industry, Commerce and Enterprises, MSME and Textiles, Information Technology and Electronics, Government of West Bengal, to please address us. Sir.
Thank you very much. I first apologize for coming in late and having missed somebody I deeply respect, Mr. Damodaran's very insightful statement. I hope you will make a summary of his key points and give it to me at the time that I will request the Director General to kindly send me so that I can learn from his very important ideas. I've had the opportunity of interacting with him in my old days, and I've always found that to be a learning experience. I'm sure you've learned a lot of a remarkable statement that Mr. Damodaran made, the former chairman of SEBI, Industrial Development Bank, IDBI, Unit Trust of India. I happened to be also on the board of UTI at one time, but he was a doyen of that area. And of course, former Chief Secretary, Government of Tripura, with administrative experience. Barely get a person of this quality, so I would congratulate the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry for inviting a person of that caliber to Kolkata. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, Mr. Indrajit Sen has been pursuing me to come to this meeting. I always would like to come, provided I have the time. The reason I reached office today at 9:15, because today we have a cabinet meeting. And obviously you understand, before the cabinet meeting, a lot of movements of important discourses and files. So I finished much of it, and I said, now I have to go and see Damodaranji, and of course be at the very important occasion of the annual general body meeting of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Allow me to say a few. I'm not sure. I heard the tail end of what Damodaranji said, and I have very similar concerns as well. So let me first submit to you that I will try to be as brief as possible. There is a discourse as to why this downturn in the economy, which I don't want to go into the numbers. You all know the numbers. You're very well learned people here. And the past presidents and his and her excellencies who are all present, they all know these numbers very well. But the fundamental question is this a business cyclical development? Or does it involve structural changes due to which this has happened? My submission to you is that as far as business cyclical downturn that you sometimes see, there was, as you can see from the data, that 2012-13, the GDP growth was 5.46%. Then it started climbing. 13-14, 6.39, 14-15, 7.41, and then 15-16, 8.15. So in a way, we could say that it bottomed out, if there is a business cyclical analysis of this. It bottomed out and started climbing. Then came November 2016. Whatever you want to call it, there are new phrases for all this. A hit to the economy came, surgical strike, some people say, some other fancy words you can use, but came demonetization, November 2016. Now you were coming out of a possible business cyclical U-curve, which seemed to be climbing up. And there was some maturity to the government's activities, some processes, chambers were engaged in all of that. Then comes demonetization. This is a structural change. It's not a cyclical change. Where the structure and function of the economy had been hit by perhaps the largest demonetization in the world, other than Libya, if you want to compare yourself to that, by Gaddafi, or with Soviet Union twice, communist regime. You want to compare them, let me leave them out. At least in democracies, we have not seen an 86% withdrawal of two kinds of currency. That's a huge structural impact on the whole economy. And then what happens? You see the evidence. From 8.15 in 15-16, middle of which came the demonetization, growth rate declined to 7.17. By 18-19, we come to another number. Why? Because in July 1st, 2017, the government in its wisdom, or lack of wisdom, introduces another massive structural change for which the economy is not prepared. Systems are not prepared, called the GST. We have been a great supporter of GST. Mamata Banerjee, in her manifesto in 2009, carried a support for GST because one tax, less Inspector Raj, would be good for the small and medium enterprises, which are backbone of the employment of this economy. So it gets introduced. I had personally spoken with late Arun Jaitley around March 2017, and I said, look, I have taken an informal input from the chairman of the GST network, GSTN, and the CEO, and they are saying we can't handle it. 300 crores of invoices a month, largest in the world. The systems are not ready. They have not done a beta test. Beta test is normal. They have not done a pilot. Please don't launch it. But again, in the great bravado, surgical strike from the Central Hall of Parliament, tryst with destiny. See, headlines. You just saw the headlines yesterday with a Texan hat and all that. That's headlines. So here was the headline. But what about the substance of it? I was honestly very worried as a student of economics, after having talked to GST network chairman, after having talked to the states. Again, a man-made or person-made, almost singular decision in a democracy, which is a structural impact, not a cyclical impact. So now, when you introduce such structural impacts, there are some cyclical processes inherent in it. But the fundamental driver was a second structural hit. Now emerges ILFS. I'm sure you would have addressed it in some way. The 1 lakh crores entity collapses. NBFCs today perhaps have lent up to 60% to the corporates of India, particularly small and medium enterprises. So with ILFS, the NBFCs start dithering and almost changing. So the third structural problem of liquidity, not in the big guys, but the lending process. So my submission is, you had 3. One, absolutely unseen in democracies in the world, demonetization. 2, unprepared GST. And 3, amazing liquidity crunch for the NBFCs. And then, of course, the fourth element, what happens to fiscal headroom? What happened to corporate taxes? The collection of corporate taxes is approximately 4.7% in the first half of this year. First 6 months, H1. 4.7%. What was the budget target? 17.5%. Now to make it to 17.5%, you will need 27% growth in tax collection at a time when your economy's growth rate is tanking. So we've thrown the economy to the wolves. So we may catch the headlines by 370 in Kashmir, probably Ayodhya coming up very soon, consolidating particularly 74% of India's population of one religious persuasion. And perhaps you will also see 3 more steps coming soon, all headlines. And fundamentally, in my private view, divisive in nature. Those are on the cards. But as far as the economy is concerned, we see a very, very difficult situation which we have put the new finance minister into. So, submission, fundamental structural change, nobody is talking about. I see newspapers talking about cycles. Probably they mean business cycles. I don't know how many of you here know that the most exciting cycle done by the early days of studies of 150 years of developed economies was a cycle called the Kondratiev cycle. That's a 50-year cycle where Kondratiev arrived at the conclusion that aside from the business cyclical process, you had this, every 50 years in the past, you had technological change. So you got a Newton, and then you got the railway engine, steam engine. That's a tectonic shift in everything. So that every 50 years you get a cycle. And now probably those Kondratiev cycles have become smaller. I don't see any studies on those. But today we are clear, at least in my mind, that a government-made structural destabilization of the economy has resulted in today's miserable situation. Highest unemployment rate in 45 years. So ultimately the rub is on the poor. I remember after the demonetization, the first statement of the Honorable Prime Minister was, and you didn't notice it, there's an ideological element to this. His first statement was, अभी अमीर लोगों को दवाई खाना पड़ेगा सोने के लिए, नींद लाने के लिए, गरीब लोग आराम से सोएंगे. That's the very first statement. You may not have noticed it. That's political economy. So the rich people will now have to take sleeping pills to go to sleep. Why? Because this is supposed to be against black money. And rich people have lots of store of black money. But the poor people will go to sleep without a sleeping pill. There's something about, nobody has analyzed this one single statement of what was behind demonetization conceptually vis-a-vis political economy. Not economics, political economy. So the people were standing in line, television cameras will go there. What was their statement, do you remember? अरे हम लोग तो लाइन में खड़ा होते ही हैं, अब अमीर लोगों को आके लाइन में खड़ा होना पड़ा. I was very taken aback. Across the country, we stand in line anyway, poor people, for ration card, for this, for that, under the worst regulatory structure. Rich people don't. Now, Mr. Modi has brought the rich people down to the line. How many rich people stood in the line, that I don't know. But perception. And I must tell you, I was in the aeroplane that day, landing in Delhi. There was a gentleman standing next to me in the bus. I don't take other things, I'm just normally, today I'm minister, tomorrow I'm not, then he will push me outside, get out. So this guy, I asked him, what do you think of demonetization? He said something very wise. He was from Bada Bazaar, heart of small business trading activity. He said, Sahab, you middle class people, professionals like you have two hands. Look at me. I said, I see two hands. He said, no, I have 500 hands. Nothing will happen to me. Now, very fascinating statement. What are these 500 hands? Jan Dhan Yojana? Please understand, small business is done not on contractual relationships. Their children are given in marriage. They have all kinds of intersocial, interlocked relationships. So when you tell a guy, you take my 100 rupees and you put it into your bank, it's not that he'll run away. Because there are very tight sociological connectivities for which they can trust each other. That's how they work. But he made a very wise statement indeed. You have two hands, we have 500 hands. So don't worry, we are okay. It didn't strike me. And today, you know that the number of suspicious transactions has grown by 1,400%, according to the director of the Department of Finance's suspicious transactions boss. It's part of the structural problem. Let me turn now for a moment, since I have already given you, I hope, some food for thought. In this environment, you know already, I don't have to repeat it, growth rate of Bengal, according to Government of India, is what? Anybody knows here? Last 18, 19, yeah? 12.58%. Highest growth rate in the country. Number 2 is Andhra Pradesh. Very progressive state, long time growth. 12.58%. How? Something to think about. Let me turn to the fiscal part. Is there fiscal headroom? I heard Damodaranji say exactly what many people have struck them, but they don't articulate. The money received from the Reserve Bank, 1.76 lakh crores or so. And if the corporate India takes that tax cut, it'll be what, sir? 1.4. So on one hand you take, on the other hand you give. But I have doubts whether they'll be able to take this. Because now, see, don't forget, the condition for this, entering this lower tax regime is, you should not have any, two things. What are they? No exemptions. No tax holidays. Now, what all of you would be doing, I know, is sitting with your chartered accountant and seeing, is it better to take the tax holidays or exemptions and all that? Or should I get into this? So, jury is still out. Take the IT sector. They have tax holiday because of SEZs. Does it make sense for them to get into this tax net? Now, of course, one good thing that came out of this is that the MAT, minimum alternate tax, has been reduced from 18 to 15%. It's not a big deal, but it's a gesture. But the question that I don't have an answer for, which I see many important chartered accountants here, firms, they run firms, please tell us in the future, does it make sense for corporate India to give up those exemptions and tax holidays and so on and enter this particular regime? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a chartered accountant. So my submission is the fiscal headroom that concerns me. On one side, your direct taxes have, in place of 17.5% rate of growth as per budget estimates, has only done 4.7% in 6 months. That means you're not getting any headroom from direct taxes. Now you come to indirect taxes, GST. GST is not meeting its target. In fact, I said something at the GST meeting which Mr. N.K. Singh particularly mentioned in his concluding statement, because it must have struck him. The state's expenditure was about 40% in developmental expenditure. Do you know what it has gone to now? 60%. So states are having to bear the development expenditure. So you introduce Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Very good, state adopts it. Then either you cut it off or you lower the percentage that you will pay. So that burden comes on the state. Can I go to the people of West Bengal and say, I will not give you Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Sorry, center has cut it off. I can't. Politically, I can't. So I continue to bear that. I can give you a list of 18 such projects of importance where the center asked us, passed an act in some cases, we adopted it, and then either they cut it off in the budget 3 years ago, or they increased our share. So states today have 60% of development expenditure on their shoulders. And what is the receipt of the states? GST is not meeting the level. So I said to Honorable N.K. Singh at the GST meetings in Goa, I said, I see a divergence between what we spend and what we receive. And it is my fear that in 2022, we will fall off the cliff. Why 2022? Today we are getting compensated by the center. In 2022, the compensation stops. Now what happens? So I made a request, and several others did as well, after I initiated the discussion. Please recommend in your Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission, to extend the period of compensation by another 3 years. That is your term of office. Government is not bound to accept that. It's a legislation it's an amendment in Parliament. But at least you can start that project. I can see clearly on the fiscal side, no headroom in the center, because direct taxes have not kept up. No headroom in terms of GST. That's indirect tax. So where is the money going to come from? Let me turn to what are the key issues before the chamber. Public expenditure. You can do what is called pump priming to correct business cycles. For pump priming, you need resources. You don't have those resources. The government will have to answer. Where will those resources for pump priming come from? I don't know. Damodaranji, having been Chief Secretary of a state as well as in the center, may be able to throw some light on that. What is the key problem? Consumption cycle. The shortfall in consumption. Shortfall in demand, you can say. Why is the auto industry in this shape? People are not buying cars for those structural harakiris that we have done. It is trickling down. The economy is not for 1 day or 1 month or 1 year. So, where is the stimulation for demand for the consumer? I don't see it. And what could be a method to do so? Chamber should do a paper on this. Corporate tax reduction may not lead to corporates taking advantage of it, as I said. But at least, what happens to pump priming? United States does it all the time. Europeans do it all the time for business cycle correction. That's called Keynesian neoclassical synthesis. That's the term for it. But we don't have the money to pump prime. If you do, tell us where it is. Number 3, investment. I was just reading today, and I was most surprised, that 8 lakh crores, 8 top 500 companies in India held cash or its equivalent, over 8 lakh crores in their books. And therefore, lack of funds was not really a deterrent to fresh investments. They had the money, 8 lakh crores in their books. Why were they sitting on it? They were not investing. But there was no demand. They invested, they produced a plant and equipment, nobody to buy. What will happen then? 8 lakh crores. So they have liquidity, but the government doesn't. Government fiscal headroom isn't there. Let me turn for a moment to some very practical things as I move towards my conclusion. Some big gains for West Bengal in the GST. I fought hard on this. I wrote a letter to the finance minister. She was kind enough to place my letter to the fitment committee. What was that? That was locomotive construction, coaches, wagons, railway equipment. Do you know what was the reality? Inverted duty structure. So the GST was 5%. Inputs they buy were at 18%. So what was happening? Input tax credit was gathering in their books, in their balance sheets. But those were not being compensated. GST Council did not allow compensation of input tax credit. And let me tell you, in 1 or 2 years, 21 units of wagon manufacture would have collapsed in India. 2 of them happen to be big ones in West Bengal, but they're all over the country. The Bihar Deputy Chief Minister, I told him, boss, you have a big problem. He said, what is it? I said, you're making locomotives in Bihar. Where did it come from, do you know? Mamata Banerjee. Mamata Banerjee was railway minister when she appointed me as chairperson of the expert committee. And she worked on this and I helped her to introduce locomotive manufacture in India beyond the little bit that railways were doing. It so happened that Mr. Lalu Prasad Yadav had already acquired the land and kept it there, didn't do anything about it. Probably was planning to do when the government changed. So Mamata Banerjee introduced PPP in locomotives. Global competitive bidding in which GE, General Electric, locomotion, some such company they have, and Bombardier and Alstom. They got those contracts. Then they end up with 5% GST and 18% input tax, which is not defrayable, gathering in their books. In West Bengal, you have Texmaco, you have Titagarh wagons. In Chennai, you have several, all over the country. So I wrote this letter. It went to the fitment committee where the officers meet. My officers fought it out. We had done the research. And we're very happy to know that has been solved. 12%, thank you, it saves 3.5 lakhs direct jobs. So 12% is now the GST for locomotives, coaches, wagons, railway equipment. So what will happen is, as they develop, as there's a differential, that differential they'll be able to defray from existing input tax credit. Slowly, what is gathered in their books they'd be able to clean up and survive. Otherwise, they would have been dead. The second interesting area, which will involve your chamber because you have a large small and medium enterprises, is I think this is a good one, job work service. And I fought for it very hard. I told Mamata Banerjee, I'm going to fight for this. To reduce rate of GST from 5% to 1.5% on supply of job work services in relation to diamonds. We have built a huge Kondratiev gems and jewelry park. Job work is very, very common. To reduce the GST from 18% to 12% on supply of machine job work. People are not even willing to reduce it 1 by 1%. I fought like hell. Finally, we kind of came to a middle ground. So the job work relating to engineering industry was 18%, except supply of job work in relation to bus body building. They'll remain at 18%. All other job work in engineering go down to 12%. And job work in diamonds, and I will tell you that in that meeting, we cut across political parties because it's interest of the state. So I got support from states where some other political party happens to rule, from 5% to 1.5% for diamonds. Another very interesting one which you may take advantage of is warehousing. In the interest of SME sector, it has been proposed to exempt prospectively service by way of storage or warehousing of cereals, pulses, fruits, nuts, vegetables, spices, copra, sugarcane, jaggery, gur, raw vegetables, fibers such as cotton, flax, jute, indigo, unmanufactured tobacco, betel leaves, tendu leaves, rice, coffee, tea. So warehousing, exempt. This is where the small and medium enterprises are going to be very, very positively affected. And Bengal fought for it single-handedly, then got support and garnered support from my other senior colleagues. So as far as GST is concerned, in the macro picture, we are in very serious trouble because the aggregate collection of GST is not coming up to speed. On one hand, we don't have the GST. On the other hand, the expenditure is climbing. And I'm deeply concerned that in 2022, the fiscal environment of states, and this is a common term that both Mr. N.K. Singh and I used, will fall off the cliff. And what's going to happen then? Is anybody thinking about it? So load more and more expenditure on us. But due to the structural reform which was done prematurely, we are not getting enough revenue. How does one handle this? Let me turn to two quick things and I'll close. There are many things that are happening in Bengal, positive things, aside from 12.58% growth. I'm very happy to say that there's an expansion project of Tata Metallics at Kharagpur. Are they your members? Tata Metallics is your member. So your member has not informed you yet, but we have gone through the cabinet in the last cabinet, so it's all done deal. The board of directors have approved and the government has approved on its side on land issues, capacity of their ductile iron pipes plant from 2 lakh tons to 4 lakh tons, double per annum, along with augmentation of their blast furnace capacity and installation of 15 megawatt captive power plant at a total investment of 600 crores. So 600 crores more additional investment. Anybody's here from the Tatas? Yeah, there you are. You're on the board of Tata Metallics. Doubling the capacity. Thank you very much, Doctor. You're on the board and this is a wonderful output. It'll employ approximately directly and indirectly, all this is permanent and contractual put together, 3,500 new jobs. So our interest is jobs and investment. And you'll be happy to know that 90 acres of land, in addition to the 200 acres that they had, closed and done. They have it. So I'm delighted to announce at your chamber, of your member, Tata Metallics, and a board member sitting here, that 600 crores investment immediately on the floor, and 3,500 jobs. I can give you 10 such examples. Today I chose to say this because I thought they would be your members. That's wonderful. Now I end with what WBIDC and BCCI are doing together. I don't know whether it has been already said. Export strategy study being done by Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry with the government on a focus with South and Southeast Asia, right? I think your past president is also involved in this, as per your activity. So you are helping us, and this is what Chamber should be doing for us, in our view, helping us to understand South and Southeast Asia. How do we penetrate in terms of export? You're looking at infrastructure, you're looking at markets, and commodities to focus on. What is it that we can export to Malaysia, to Indonesia, to Singapore? Of course, I'll end with a little bit of global for 2 minutes. So this is very, very good that we have Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry doing this study for us. And when will the study be in? More or less. 30th of September. So before the puja begins, we'll have a study from you. That's wonderful. Or as soon as puja finishes, we will take a look at that. Number 2, you're doing a second study, cross-organizational study for WBIDC, WBIIDC, and WBSIDC. We have 3 corporations. All 3 has parks, but there is no synchronization with regard to land allotment, management procedure of the parks. So we said, let's get a third entity rather than us going into it. Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry is doing a study for us, looking at the 3 corporations. And we rarely do this, because chambers, you give them something to do, then they go and tell the media. What's the negative, what's the positive. You get a different headline than you expect. But we trust you. We know that, this is confidentiality will be there, and let us do a proper policy work on this. So you're going to synchronize 3 corporations, all 3 have parks, set up at different points in history. Now we want to synchronize and organize, and so towards that, if you give us a study, we will, of course, may not accept all of your suggestions because the government had its own constraints. We'll put together and try and clean that up. I'll end by saying while the process of national fiscal lack of headroom, falling growth, I've said that, but what makes me very worried is the international scene. Oil prices, of course, is a big worry. I must also say that I am deeply concerned that UK economy, US economy, growth rate has fallen to 2.1% in the second quarter. Is that going to continue? Germany, 0.5% annual growth. You were in Germany with a delegation from Bengal Chamber of Commerce, and WBIDC was there with you. I'm concerned that the German economy is the pillar of the European economy. Is this slowdown important? How is it going to affect us? How is it going to affect your exports, the delegation you took? So we have to be working closer with the Germans. We have tied up with North Rhine-Westphalia. I see Indo-German Chamber present here. We have tied up with North Rhine-Westphalia as a state-to-state with 22% GDP of Germany. Düsseldorf being its headquarters. We are now looking at and working with the Indo-German Chamber very closely. So Germany is an issue that you may want to look at and see how you re-strategize with the Germans. And especially the Mittelstand, the smaller company. That 93% of German employment and probably big proportion of GDP comes from the Mittelstand, like us. China, slowdown is deepening. Singapore, probably heading for a recession. When I was looking, I see the Honorable Consul General of Japan here, sharp downward revision of capital expenditure in Japan. Japan is doing better than these examples. But I think once Japanese capital expenditure has constraint, they are top class in technology, in machine, future. So we have to watch this. I would request the Chamber to look at the global structure, see how we position ourselves from Bengal. Where are the gaps? Where is it that we can enter, along with the study that I mentioned on East and Southeast Asia? Let's not forget the big economies, the United States, Germany, Japan. Of course, China slowed down. Look at that. And we put this together as a strategy for Bengal so that our growth rate of 12.58% continues into the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here. I hope I have provoked you enough to think. As far as our government is concerned, our government is very optimistic. Mamata Banerjee has led it from the fund. Capital expenditure grown 11 times. Plan expenditure 5 times. Those are the headrooms of the fiscal stimulant, which then produces Keynesian multiplier effect on consumers. Yesterday, I don't go to malls, because if I go there, I have no privacy. People will come, they want to take, talk to me, talk to their problems. Somebody went to the mall and came back and said, yesterday apparently in a mall near our house, which is quite high-end, footfalls were amazing. There was no space to walk. If you have 12.58% GDP growth, it'll show up in terms of incomes. I want to end by saying I'm most excited about MSME, which is a core competency of your chamber. I had set a target of 38,000 crores 2 years ago. They achieved 44,000 crores of lending by the banks. I set a target of 50,000 crores. They've achieved 55,000 crores to MSMEs. This year, my target is 70,000 crores. And I just took a review. We are on track. That's where the jobs are. That's where the stimulant is. That's where the innovation is. So my submission is, please keep at it. I'm delighted to be here. You have honored me by calling me, and therefore you've called it Commemorative Address. I hope this will be somewhat useful, but I'm deeply concerned about headline seeking as against substance, because now time has come for us to move to substance at the national level. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Dhanyavad.
Our deepest gratitude to Dr. Mitra as ever, and it was so heartening and so encouraging for us to hear him talk about the projects that we are so fortunate to be undertaking with WBIDC and the Commerce and Industries Department of the State Government. May I now request Mr. B.B. Chatterjee, President-Designate of the Bengal Chamber, to please deliver the formal vote of thanks. Sir.
Respected and honorable dignitaries on the dais, former presidents, distinguished guests from the Consular Corps, members and invitees of the Bengal Chamber, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is a personal privilege for me to deliver the vote of thanks on conclusion of the most special session of the Chamber. The annual general meeting acts as a bridge to a year gone by and the coming year. It concludes a year in which your Chamber has fulfilled its mandate through its multifarious activities, which you were shown a little while ago, and the year ahead, with the Chamber undertaking to enlarge its role and activities, newer horizons keeping in mind. We have concluded a most fascinating session where we had the opportunity to hear two of the finest economic minds of our country. They have enlightened us with knowledge and insights so essential to weave through the current and complex realities confronting the country and the economy. A heartfelt thanks to Sri M. Damodaran, former chairman of SEBI, UTI, and IDBI. A sincerest gratitude to Dr. Amit Mitra, Honorable Minister in Charge, Finance, Industry, Commerce and Enterprises, MSME, and Textiles, Information Technology, and Electronics, Government of West Bengal, for being with us this morning. We are indebted to Dr. Mitra and Sri Damodaran sir. We are honored by your august presence as chief guest and guest of honor, sir. Dr. Mitra is a pillar of support to the Chamber and a source of inspiration to business, commerce, and industry in the state and beyond. May I now request the President, Mr. Indrajit Sen, to come forward and present tokens of our deep appreciation to the dignitaries on the dais. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request all of you to please carry forward this motion once again with acclamation.
I'll quietly, please continue your very important session. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion of the public session of the AGM. In a few minutes' time, we shall commence with the business session, in which those members who are willing to attend, you can please stay back. In the meantime, lunch is being served at the Bengal Lounge on the 3rd level. So we would request our guests to please proceed for lunch. And just give us a few minutes to just regroup and reorganize for the business session, which is the next session for the 165th AGM of the Bengal Chamber. Thank you very much.